Fetch him up, Gunner. Fetch it up, Gunner. Fetch it up. Fetch it. Got him. Here he comes.
Welcome back to American Arms Channel, ladies and gentlemen. And today, as you can tell by the title of the video, we're taking a look at another 10-gauge waterfowl load, specifically a bismuth load. Now, this load in particular is going to be for those of you who like to run a lighter duck load, and for those of you that might be looking for something that is usable in a short-chambered double or single barrel shotgun, such as a repeating lever action Winchester 1901, Lefevre's, Fox, Stevens, Ithacas that are pre-magnum chambering or were manufactured with a short chamber. There's also some European guns that are nitro-proofed but did not receive a magnum chambering or proofing. So a short hull might be in order, and you might want to take those out for duck hunting. But you don't want something incredibly anemic, but it still needs to be relatively safe in that shotgun. You may also be looking for something that is a short-chambered load that will cycle in a repeater, such as a well-tuned and operating Mag10 or SP10 or the Browning pump shotgun 10-gauge, BPS10. All of those are viable with this cartridge I'm going to show you. The caveat being that Browning Gold 10s will not cycle this load. They will extract and eject the cartridge, but due to the design, they won't be able to feed the next cartridge, at least reliably. And if they do, or you've tuned them to, you won't get 3 shots. You'll have a 2-shot auto. With that understanding and premise to this load, let's get right into it. Take a look at my load notes, assemble the cartridge, and see how it does on paper. Before we get into the components of the cartridge, let's cover the load notes. Now, this specific load is going to come from my Devastator series, and if you've watched the videos on that and understand the development, you know that that load is a 2-ounce bismuth load for the 3.5-inch 10-gauge Magnum, traveling approximately 1275 with your choice of bismuth shot, the main factor being protecting the shot from the bore and from itself with buffer, wrapped, or full-length wad, and pushing downrange at moderate velocities. The Devastator concept pretty much fills exactly that, and I've got it written out for myself here in my own hieroglyphics. But today we're taking a look at the Devastator Short Range, or SR. This load, as I premised, was pretty much a brainchild of mine to say, what if someone wants to run a short chambered 10 or is just looking to save a little bit on shot, doesn't need as heavy a payload because they're hunting with the 10 in earlier season where they consistently have small ducks, large ducks, medium to small geese decoying inside of 40 to 45 yards with maybe outside shots at 50. Do you really need a 10 at those ranges? Not necessarily, but some of us just have a gun that we want to use all the time or want to have a load for that special hunt where we're taking out Granddad's 10 gauge or something else, and it can be applicable to any gauge. So let's take a look here. This is a 2 7/8 inch hull. Now you're not going to buy these, you're going to cut these down. We're going to base this on a Cheddite, but I have done testing on short rounds like this in the past. I have found minimal to no impact to performance utilizing other hulls. Your most similar will be the Winchester and the Federal when you cut them down as far as capacity goes, but you will see some pressure differences if you send them off for testing. So keep that in mind. This load was developed with the Cheddite hull, 3.5 inch cut down to 2 7/8. Primer is the Cheddite CX2000. It is a standard primer for the 209 pattern, and you can use any standard 209 as substitute if you need to. Powder is Hodgdon Long Shot. We're going to run 36 to 40 grains. Why the variance in the powder run? Well, 36 is going to put you right around 1,400 feet per second, a little bit less, a little bit more, depending upon barrel length and environmental factors. 40 grains is actually going to put you at 1,500 feet per second average out of a 28-inch barrel. 30-inch, you might get a little bit more. 26, 24, you're going to get a little bit less. Do we need that velocity? No. Ideally, you keep everything between 1,350 and 1,400 for lighter loads, but 10 gauge with big shot is great between 1,250 and 1,350. So why so fast? Well, it's just the nature of the powder charge, and long shot doesn't peak pressures that bad. But if you want a screaming load, you can achieve it with this safely. If you're running an older gun, I'd stick to that 36 grains. It's going to get everything you need done. It's also going to have an easier time patterning. You pick the bismuth of your choice. I recommend number 3 or 4 shot size. And the best patterning bismuth I have found so far is going to be Boss shot shells, copper plated, and you can buy that from them by the pound. It's going to run you a premium over something like roto metals, but the consistency in roundness is going to be much greater, and actually it runs slightly larger than rotos per their claimed shot size. The roto is a lot of times more like a 3.5 if you order the 3s, whereas the Boss is pretty much a true number 3 in my experience, and patterning is usually a bit better, but the rotos will work because, again, we're looking at a short range load here. We're not trying to reach out past 45, 50 yards. This is for over the decoys, in the decoys, edge of the spread kind of shooting with the 10. We're going to run the BPI PT1044, or if you have them, the Remington SP10. I have tested both. Neither one really has a discernible patterning difference. I caveat that with the standard Devastator load as well, if you're using the version 1 and not the version 2 load. So do take that into account. Next, you're going to have a Mylar wrap. You're going to want to run a 3 or 4 mil, and you're going to want that sheet to be 2.280 by 1.270, or cut however you see fit. But that is going to be just long enough to wrap itself over and have a little bit of overlap, as well as just tall enough to fit the entirety of that 1 5/8 ounce payload inside of it. Again, 1 5/8 ounce bismuth payload, number 2, 3, or 4 shot size. I prefer 3s. You run as you see fit. If you want to have a beehive of number 5s going down range, number 5 bismuth has plenty of penetrative potential and energy potential, going 1,300 to 1,500 feet per second at the muzzle to absolutely dispatch game. Just remember, like with any sphere, any pellet size, the faster you push it, the faster it slows down. That harder push at the front, exponential increase in drag, you're going to lose all of that advantage by 30 to 35 yards. But if you're creating a short range load, that's fine if you just really want to add that extra sauce. But if you want to reduce recoil, go with the lighter powder charge, stay around that 36, 37 grains of long shot, and this load will do everything you need it to. We're going to top that off with 3 cc's, or approximately 24 to 26 grains of precision reloading spherical buffer, and put 2 OS10 cards on top of that, and we're going to roll crimp that. If you drop the powder charge to around 34, and maybe you go just a touch lighter, 1 5/8 ounces, you have a press that's set up to fold crimp, you can do that. But at 2 7/8 inches on the nose, with this specific load stack, you're not going to be able to fold crimp this one. It will be roll crimp required. And then we are going to seal that with clear nail polish, which is my preferred. All right, so to start off, again, a Cheddite hull, 2 7/8 inch. Try to cut it as even as possible, but with a roll crimp, it's not going to matter that much, so you don't have to be too OCD about getting it just perfect. Long shot for your powder, again, lighter velocities, a little bit better time getting that to pattern tighter out of tighter chokes. You're going to want to throw about 36 grains. If you want a full house, blistering 1,500 foot per second load, you don't need it, but you can do it, and that's what I'm going to load up here tonight. We can do 40 grains, and that's going to be your max. I do not have these loads pressure tested, so remember, this is just some guy on the internet telling you what he's doing. I'm not telling you to do it. If you choose to load these loads, you do it at your own risk. All right, disclaimer on the side there. After we throw our powder charge, obviously we've got a standard 209. We have either the Remington SP10. I sure hope these come back someday on the market because I really love this wad. Or, as you are probably going to have to procure if you don't have them already in your loading kit, the BPI PT1044. These are made by Claybuster now, and they are a fantastic wad as well. I just like the SP10 a little bit better. The capacity on them is about the same. They're going to sit about the same height, as you can see here. They're going to pattern relatively the same as well, especially with a Mylar wrap in the same shot inside of them. Mylar wrap, I told you, you're going to have about a 2.2 and a 1.2 something inch wrap. You don't have to be dead nuts on. You just need to make sure that it contains all of the shot. Then you're going to want to throw about 3 cc's or 24 to 28 grains of the Precision Reloading spherical buffer. This stuff is fantastic. I actually bought the big old bag that runs you about 50 bucks shipped, and that will last you 5 ever. So unless you're professionally or semi-professionally reloading buffered loads constantly, like our friend Keith Gee over at Salt Creek Ammunition. Shout out to you, Keith. I appreciate your viewership and your comments in talking through some of our specialty projects. Hopefully we will get to continue to do that in the future. Anyhow, unless you're doing something like Keith is doing at Salt Creek, you probably aren't going to go through it that much. So it'll last you, again, 5 ever. And finally, we're going to top that shot off with 2 Overshot cards. You can do 1. I just like to do 2 because I am extra. Now, a discussion on shot, or at least a statement on shot. Again, the Roto is going to be a pretty decent shot. It's going to be your lower cost shot that's American made. Sphero is going to be extremely extremely round and polished, but I just have not had the best luck with it. And Boss is going to be the best, unless you're dropping your own shot, and then, you know, sky's the limit there. But you can do number 3s. You can see perhaps on camera that the 3s on the Boss look just a touch bigger. At least my eye can perceive it. Maybe you can't over the camera. But a lot more consistent. The Roto is good, but I've come to not prefer it just because of its imperfections. The Boss, I see a lot less imperfections overall, and we're going to throw a 1 5/8 charge of the number 3 Boss today. You can also do number 4 Boss. This was salvaged out of a couple rounds that got chewed up by the dog. You'd think him being 5, he wouldn't do that anymore, but I am wrong in that assumption. Anyhow, enough blabbing. Let's throw these rounds together. So we're going to take our powder funnel here, and again, 40 grains of long shot is going down into the tube. I'm going to grab our wad seater here. I am going to use the PT1044 in this instance and send that on down with a little bit of compression onto that powder. This is not going to seal in the Cheddite hull, at least while you're pressing it in, quite as well as the SP10 does. That's part of the reason why I like the SP10, but upon firing, you get plenty of seal, and it goes right to that 7.75 bore that the 10 gauge has. So not too much of a worry there. I just prefer that SP10. Next, we're going to roll up like we're making some rolling paper here, our little Mylar wrap. We're going to drop that guy down in there and push it on down in. We are ready for our shot charge. So we're going to throw 1 5/8 ounces. As I said, if you wanted to lighten this up, you could. You're going to increase velocity. You're also going to need a little bit of filler, or you could fold crimp it if you so chose. But 1.625 ounces off the scale. We are almost there, and we went just a touch over. It's probably 2 pellets worth. 1.60, we'll throw 1 more pellet in, and 1.625. In Roto, you're going to get about 196 pellets of number 3 on average. And with Boss, you're going to come in at right about 189 to 192. It can vary just a little bit, but there is our 1 5/8 ounce charge. I've started to use a funnel, make it easier on myself when I'm hand throwing my shot here. And there we go. Just light taps to get her down in there under the lip of that Mylar wrap. You can see how high this shot charge sits right now. Part of the reason, again, we have to roll crimp this girl, but I digress. 1 dipper with this Lee 190 sized dipper here is all it'll take. We're just going to slowly tap and pour, and that will about do it. Now we can take our Overshot cards and insert. I usually start out with one, not both, and I press all the way around. You can use your press to seat these if you'd like. I find hand seating them is both rewarding and fun, but if you're trying to turn and burn out a bunch of cartridges in one session, then your press will definitely come in handy. We are ready to roll crimp. I'm just going to use a hand drill. I still need to get set up on having a drill press, which is going to give you a much more even roll crimp more consistently. And this is the BPI roll crimp tool. I would suggest that a Gype roll crimp tool will probably give you the best. Now, what I have found, especially when loading multiple roll crimp hulls, is a little tiny shot of one shot onto the roll crimp tool, maybe two there, and then letting it spin for a second, get an even coat, and giving it some air. It really helps. Maybe it's all in my head, but I find that it helps produce a little bit better crimp for me. So we're going to try and not block the camera, but probably still block it. Flat surface here. We're going to get going and then come right down. Started to get a little bit of a turn. That's relatively flat there. And you can label the Overshot card if you like, but because we are stamping the outside here, and I've already got her labeled, I'll just have to relabel the number because I was a little high there. Will be good to seal that now. I like to use just dollar store gel clear nail polish. It works really well, leaves minimal residue in your chamber, and I have gone to it as my crimp seal it for everything. I seal all of my loads now, and we're almost out here in this bottle, so we're actually going to pour just a little bit. What also has worked for me is liquid silicone, and if you have that for sealing your leather boots for hunting or anything like that, you can give that a try. I found it works pretty good. It just it gets thin and it cracks a little bit easier than the nail polish. And boom, we let that guy sit, and it is ready to go kill some ducks. Let's get onto the pattern board and then give you final thoughts on the load.
All right.
And so here I'm loading up 3 rounds just to show the cycling. I do end up having a malfunction here, and I think it was just an extractor slip on the case rim. Cheddite hulls are a little bit rounded over compared to others, so I find that sometimes they have a greater chance of malfunction. Send this down range. You can tell pretty smooth operation there, only about 35 yards away on that pattern. See the Mylar wrap ditching as well as the wad ditching right about the 30-yard mark. And we did have a little bit of an extraction injection. No pressure signs though. Loading up again here, we had a good cycling round here, and this is approximately 50 yards. Beautiful cycling, and that's what I typically see out of this load and my other short loads in this specific Mag10 Deluxe. Recoil is not bad. Obviously, I'm in an odd stance trying to get over the chronograph. First shot was 1509, second shot was 1490. I was a little bit farther back on the second shot. 35-yard pattern, 136 out of approximately 196, or 69.4%. That's about a modified pattern. Very nice looking. Definitely more than capable for ducks over the decoys out to 40 yards. Looking at 50 yards, we can see this is where it falls off and why this load is called a short-range Devastator. We're really going to need to play with choking to get out to that 50-yard mark, but for the most part, this is a closer range 10-gauge load. The wads here, both of these are SP10s, and you see the Mylar wrap. No surprises here. Looks beautiful and perfect. Well, as we saw on the pattern board, this has the potential to do very well and not so great. Those samples are only out of this Mag10 Deluxe with the Briley 745 light full. This choke and barrel typically pattern everything exceptionally well, but for what this load is for, that would be acceptable. 45 yards and in, I'd probably call it at 40 since this is more so an over the decoys 10 gauge load. But if you play with the choking, you reduce the powder charge a little bit and put it at more moderate velocities, you'll be able to control that shot a little bit better. Also, going with a copper plated shot helps out a lot, but the load in general is set up to pattern as tight or as open as you want it to. So you're going to have to play with it with your gun. It's going to be luck of the draw with fixed choke barrels. In all honesty, at the time of recording, I have not patterned it out of my fixed choke Mag10 with the 725 constriction. I would expect it to do relatively the same as what this Mag10 Deluxe did, but you've got a pattern to know. Patterns are three-dimensional objects. It's a cloud of shot going downrange. There's a start, there's a middle, there's an end, there's an outside, there's an inside. But what you're finding with that is the highest, that two-dimensional print of that pattern is the highest probability that you will be able to strike a bird. At 35 yards, more than acceptable modified pattern. At 50, it's a little bit too open, but that's why you pattern, and that's why you've got to know your limitations. If you need that 45 to 60 yard range, you'll want to go to the 2-ounce charge for the standard Devastator. We'll also cover the Devastator long range going to a true BB shot size in another video. But for now, I hope you really do enjoy loading and testing out this short range version of the Devastator if it fits your fancy. Some rounds, or excuse me, some guns will cycle this in semi-auto, some won't. I know the BPS10 for sure will, and again, any break action gun will as well. So let me know your thoughts down below. As always, guys, God bless, keep your powder dry. I'll see you in the next video.